19th-century insomnia cures that involve cheese. Hey guys, tonight we're curling up under a quilt of candlelight and cheese fumes. That's right, cheese. You're stepping into the 1800s, into stuffy parlors and creaky four-poster beds. But a cure for insomnia wasn't lavender or melatonin. It was an alarming wedge of dairy. You're nibbling cheddar not with crackers, but with hopes of conquering restless nights, surrounded by lace doilies, velvet drapes, an era that truly believed a good night's sleep could be aged in a cellar. Your feet creak over floorboards as you tiptoe into a parlor dimly lit by gaslight. On the hearth, a plate of mild cheddar has been lovingly placed beside a pewter goblet of warm milk. No, you're not hallucinating. Yet, you're just following doctor's orders. This is what a midnight remedy looked like in the 19th century. Dairy-heavy, questionably effective, and often prescribed with a wink and an overly confident mustache. You probably won't survive this, not because it's dangerous, but because it's so strange you might fall asleep just trying to wrap your head around it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Midnight in Milwaukee? 3 a.m. in Tokyo? I want to hear it. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself seated on a velvet chaise in a corner of a room thick with lace and quiet desperation. A woman in her 50s, corseted within an inch of her life, gently slices a sliver of Cheshire cheese and places it on her tongue like a communion wafer. Her husband snores on the other side of the wall. She sighs. Tonight, she's not praying for sleep. She's eating for it. Mainstream medical guide to the 1800s, especially those written for upper-middle-class women, often recommended small portions of aged cheese before bed. The logic? Cheese was grounding, believed to slow the body's energies, sort of like a carb-heavy lullaby. Victorian doctors didn't have neuroscience, but they had opinions. Lots of them. You lean over the side table and note the pamphlet. The restorative dairy slumbered through cultured fat. It smells faintly of mildew and overconfidence. Someone underlined the phrase, preferably cheddar, aged, never mold-struck. Some believed it balanced night humors, a fancy way of saying you're less likely to toss and turn if you're digesting a block of something greasy. Now here's your quirky tidbit for this stretch of the night. Some households paired their bedtime cheese with a prayer book and a cat. Why? Because it was considered unlucky to sleep alone after consuming aged provender. Superstition held that dairy attracted not only dreams but spirits, and a feline companion could absorb any unwanted visitors. Cats, the original ghost filters. Historians still argue whether the popularity of cheese in bedtime rituals was due to genuine belief or just a polite excuse to snack after hours. Some suggest it was merely a genteel rebellion, one of the few indulgences acceptable for respectable women who couldn't openly raid the pantry like their less corseted peers. You wander upstairs into a colder room, this one lit only by moonlight and a sputtering coal grate. A young governess sits cross-legged on her mattress, clutching a hunk of dried cheese in one hand and a half-finished diary entry in the other. Her script reads, "Fourth night sleepless. Mr. Ellis again, delayed returning. Tried cheddar per Aunt May's suggestion. No change yet. Slight gurgling." She takes another bite, chews thoughtfully, then curls beneath a stiff wool blanket that smells of lavender and attic wood. She doesn't sleep, but she's calmer. Cheddar doesn't sedate her, but it gives her something to focus on other than her employer's absence or her lack of prospects. You lie down beside her, metaphorically, and try to feel what she feels. The room too quiet, the silence pressing like fog, and the peculiar comfort of cheese melting slowly on the tongue. It's absurd and oddly tender. Back downstairs, a grandfather dozes in a rocking chair. In his lap, a cloth napkin with a tiny heel of double Gloucester. He swears he hasn't been sleeping. He also swears his cheese helps his bones hum just so. No one argues, mostly because he's asleep within minutes. The hearth crackles, your toes warm. You begin to notice a pattern. Cheese wasn't just a snack. It was ritual reassurance, a soft rebellion against the night's long questions. In the 1800s, when darkness was thick and dreams weren't always kind, a bit of dairy was something you could control. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the flicker of firelight dance against your eyelids. Somewhere beyond the window, a carriage rumbles past. Inside, someone else is likely nibbling a wedge of sleep-promising Wensleydale, hoping it hushes the ghost of worry or longing. Will it work for you? That's not really the point, because here, wrapped in linen and candlelight, you've already stepped back into something softer than science. You're steeped in old hopes, fermented charm, and the hum of fire-warmed rooms where people once believed cheese could carry them gently into dreams. And maybe, just maybe, they were right. The governess finally drifts off, cheddar-fueled or not, and now it's your turn to wander into the next household. This one is bustling even after dark, all creaky floors and cluttered tabletops, like someone took a family of 9 and crammed them into a space built for 3. You duck past a dangling laundry line and find yourself in the kitchen, where the eldest son is working a chunk of Stilton onto a cracker with a kind of precision normally reserved for shipbuilding. He glances over at his father, who's got one eye open and a skeptical brow raised. Blue cheese again? The father says, "You'll be dreaming about cows and waistcoats." The son shrugs. Better than lying awake thinking about that broken loom again. Welcome to a working-class household in the late 1800s, where sleep is less a luxury and more like a prize in a raffle you don't remember entering. These folks rise before the sun and drop like bricks after supper, except when they don't. And when insomnia hits, they don't reach for fancy tinctures or expensive tonics. They reach for what they have: cheese from the cellar, bread from the day before, and a bit of familial teasing to go with it. Here's your historical fact for tonight's stroll. In the 19th century, many British and American doctors actually encouraged heavy snacks before bed, cheese included, especially for laborers. The idea was that exertion demanded a more anchored sleep. A warm stomach, they believed, led to a calm mind. But of course, opinions varied wildly. One pamphlet from 1857 insists that eating cheese before bed would result in hysterical dreams, unseemly visions, and a tendency toward biting one's spouse upon waking. Charming. You head to the pantry and find a young girl sitting on an overturned bucket, whispering to a wedge of red Leicester, as if it's a sleeping spell. They say if you eat just a thumb-sized piece and think of nothing, your body will think you're dead and let you rest. She gives you a solemn nod. She clearly believes this with every freckle on her nose. Quirky tidbit. Folklore in parts of rural England once claimed that cheese had moon-thick properties, meaning It absorbed the night's energy like a sponge and could, when eaten with intent, transfer its drowsiness to the person consuming it. Cheese as moonlight fuel. Soft science? Definitely. But poetic? Absolutely. You sit beside her and imagine biting into a moon-soaked cheddar triangle. It's cool, a bit crumbly, and just weird enough to work. Historians still argue whether these cheese sleep superstitions stem from genuine trial and error or were simply a case of collective culinary wishful thinking. After all, this was the same century that sold snake oil as a cure for baldness and recommended opium for teething babies. Back in the front room, the entire family is gathered. One of the older children, maybe 14, maybe 35, you lose track in this lighting, is playing a lullaby on a homemade tin whistle. His sister sits cross-legged by the hearth with a tray of cheese samples she's calling the midnight flight. There's aged Parmesan for dreams of flying, soft goat cheese for romantic visions, and a gooey brie if you just want to sleep without screaming. No one's judging her logic. The adults are too tired, and frankly, it all sounds reasonable by candlelight. You pass around the tray. Each bite is paired with a hopeful glance at the ceiling. You ease closer to the hearth, and the family dog shifts to make space. Even the animals seem to understand this ritual. Everyone here is trying. Trying not to toss, not to think too hard, not to let the silence of night spiral into something bigger than they can fix. One of the youngest kids, barely old enough to speak, whispers something into the fire, something about cheese soldiers. You choose not to ask. You move on. Next door, a man in a tailor's apron is finishing a garment under lamplight. His hands are callous, his eyes drooping, but he keeps at it. When he finally puts down the needle, he reaches for a chip plate under the side table. On it, a sliver of aged sheep's milk cheese, precisely cut, almost reverent. He eats it slowly, eyes closed, like it's a spell he's casting with his tongue. Turns out he's not the only one. In artisan communities across Europe and America during the 19th century, it was common for craftspeople to close the day with a symbolic action. For some, that was turning the tools upside down. For others, it was locking the workroom twice. And for a surprisingly large group, it was eating a tiny bite of cheese, often whatever was left from lunch, as a way to mark the mental shift from labor to rest. Symbolic dairy. Honestly, that could be the subtitle of this whole journey. You sit beside the tailor as he wraps himself in a worn quilt, the smell of fabric dye and sheep cheese lingering in the air. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. He's done his part. Now it's up to sleep to meet him halfway. You step out into the night, the cool air biting but not cruel. Somewhere down the street, someone else is cutting into a wheel of sleep hope. Another fire crackles. Another stomach fills with warmth. You're surrounded by dreams in waiting, each one wrapped in cloth and milk fat. The stars don't blink. Neither do you. You step over a puddle that might be soup, mud, or something more mysterious. This is a city, after all, and make your way into a narrow alleyway where a lantern swings from a crooked hook above a tiny apothecary. The sign reads, Dr. Albrecht, Herbs, Salves, and Somnolescent Delicacies. Inside, the smell hits first, crushed thyme, dried roses, and something undeniably dairy. Dr. Albrecht is nowhere to be seen, but his assistant, a lanky boy with eyebrows like frantic caterpillars, greets you with a sleepy nod. He's polishing a glass jar labeled Camembert Draft and humming a lullaby that probably predates plumbing. For those restless nights, he says, holding the jar aloft like it contains moonlight. You sidle up to the counter and examine a shelf of peculiar remedies. Pressed cheese tablets, whey-based tonics, and something called Somni curd. According to a curling tag, it's best served at precisely 7:33 p.m. with quiet thoughts and wool socks. Mainstream historical fact. Some 19th century apothecaries did experiment with combining cheese, particularly soft, fermented types, with sleep-inducing herbs. Chamomile-infused curds and valerian-laced whey were sold under various sleepy names, though the exact effects were inconsistent at best and gastrointestinal at worst. Still, the placebo was powerful. Dr. Albrecht appears suddenly from behind a curtain, holding a spoon with a dollop of something beige and glistening. "Smell this," he says solemnly. "Blue vein slumber paste." You don't want to, but you do. It's intense. Like old dreams and regret. He grins, puts a mule to sleep in under 15 minutes. Probably. You back away carefully, avoiding the cat sprawl beneath a shelf labeled cheddar compresses. The assistant whispers he only uses goat milk when he's sad. Quirky tidbit. There was one a trend in parts of Vienna where pharmacists offered cheese compresses for insomnia, small cloth bundles of aged cheese mixed with lavender, tied to the wrist at bedtime. The scent was believed to lull the heart and calm the liver. Yes, the liver. No, it doesn't make sense now either. Historians still argue whether these cheese-based concoctions had any measurable effect or were simply a delicious excuse to upcharge desperate customers. Some records suggest rival apothecaries accuse each other of dairy charlatanry, which is both hilarious and, honestly, a phrase that deserves to come back. Outside the apothecary, you follow a flicker of light into a boarding house down the street. The sign reads modest rooms, hot tea, limited judgment. Inside, the fire's low and the conversation is quieter than the furniture creaks. A middle-aged man in plaid suspenders is distributing slices of warm raclette from a portable brazier to anyone who looks even vaguely troubled. This, he announces, is the good kind. Cures night terrors, heartbreak, and an unfortunate mustache. Someone laughs. Someone else sighs with relief. You grab a tin plate and accept your slice, molten and golden, served with a small pickle and the kind of eye contact that says, "I've been there too." Around the table, travelers from all walks of life munch in silence. It's a midnight support group, but with cheese. The man in suspenders, his name is Todd, obviously, swears by this ritual. He's been to 3 countries, for marriages, and one very weird seance in Cleveland, but raclette? That's the one thing that keeps him grounded. He nods at you. You eat something hot before sleep, you dream softer. Then adds, especially if it's melty and smells like gym socks. You don't question it. You just let the warmth seep into your fingertips and your chest. Right where the worry usually curls up, in the corner, an old woman wraps herself in a blanket patterned with stars and spoons cheese curds from a jar like they're holy wafers. "Every night," she murmurs, "since the war." She doesn't specify which one. No one asks. There's something powerful about this quiet ritual. It's not elegant. It's not always sanitary. But it's real. A shared, slow-motion rebellion against the insomnia that follows grief, regret, or simply too many thoughts. You head upstairs to find a young woman brushing her hair in front of a mirror. She pauses, sniffs the air, then smiles. "Raclette night," she says. "Always the best dreams." On her vanity, a saucer with 3 cheese cubes and a single rose petal, her own homemade charm against the night. You lie back on the spare cot beside her dresser and listen to the creak of the floorboards, the sigh of the settling building, and the fading voices downstairs. Everyone here is chasing the same thing: stillness, sleep, safety wrapped in dairy. You close your eyes. A breeze rattles the shutters. The air smells like hope and gorgonzola. You're halfway to dreaming. You wake. Or maybe you never quite fell asleep, and now you're walking through a moonlit pasture that smells faintly of hay, damp wool, and cheddar. Off in the distance, a lantern flickers in a barn window. A cow moves softly, like she too has something on her mind. You approach the barn and duck inside. It's warm, close, filled with a muffled rustle of straw on the low, drowsy hum of animals too content to care that you're there. A woman stands by a workbench near the far wall, stirring a clay pot nestled in a bed of embers. She's humming an old lullaby, the kind that has no real words, just vowels and comfort. "Warm way," she says without looking up. "Best thing for the nerves. Second only to divorce." You blink. She gestures to a wooden mug on the bench, the sides coated in a pale golden film. It settles the stomach, calms the blood, and if you're lucky, puts you so far under, you miss the rooster entirely. You take a sip. It's sweet, slightly sour, earthy in a way that makes you want to sit down and reevaluate your life choices, which you do, on a bale of hay next to a goat with judgmental eyes. Mainstream historical fact. In rural parts of 19th century Europe, particularly among farming communities, warm whey was a common evening tonic, not just a byproduct of cheese making. It was valued for its supposed calming properties and given to children, the elderly, and anyone complaining about nervous fits or moon thoughts. The woman finally turns to you. She's wearing a linen shift, her hair wrapped in a kerchief that's seen better centuries. "You look like someone with brain chatter," she says kindly. "That'll pass. Drink more." You oblige. The goat sneezes. Somewhere, a rooster cackles prematurely, and the woman throws it a look that could curdle milk. Quirky tidbit. In some Scandinavian farming circles, whey was believed to carry some memory, the warmth of summer days trapped in the milk. Drinking it at night was a way of borrowing that brightness for sleep. The theory had zero science, but infinite charm. Outside, the stars spin slowly in the clear sky, the kind of sky that makes you feel small and safe at the same time. You lean back, the straw poking through your borrowed blanket, and think about the strange comfort being cared for by strangers and cows. The woman sits beside you with her own mug. "My husband swears by cheese on toast," she confesses. "Every night. Says it keeps the nightmares away." You nod, already half asleep, and mutter something about trying it sometime. She pats your hand like you just agreed to something far more serious. A breeze sighs to the rafters, rustling the hanging herbs. Mint, lavender, and something sharper you can't name. You rise again, maybe in the dream, maybe in memory, and now you're standing in the drawing room of a well-dressed London gentleman. He's in a smoking jacket. His dog is in a smaller, matching smoking jacket. You pretend not to notice. "Welcome," he says, swirling a glass of brandy in one hand and balancing a cracker with Stilton in the other. "We're just getting started." He leads you to a chaise long draped in imported cashmere and offers you a slice of cheese on apple. A little indulgence before bed, he says, keeps the demons at bay. There's a fire crackling on the hearth, and the room smells like wax, polished wood, and a cheese you're fairly sure is sentient. He sits across from you and explains with great seriousness that the British upper class once believed certain blue cheeses had sedative qualities, especially when paired with port. Rich men sleep richer, he muses. Mainstream historical fact. Stilton, Roquefort, and other mold-ripened cheeses were once believed to have blue vapors, a faintly mystical aura that influenced dreams. Combined with warm port or brandy, they were considered effective sedatives among the wealthy elite in Victorian Britain. His dog yawns dramatically. You nibble the apple and cheese. It's sharp and creamy, strangely grounding, like someone telling you, you made it through the day, now rest. The gentleman leans back and adds, of course, some say the cheese causes the dreams, not prevents them. You pause mid-bite. Historians still argue whether the vivid dreams associated with cheese stem from its chemistry or from sheer cultural suggestion. He says, though I suspect it depends on whether one prefers dragons or dinner parties in their sleep. You swallow slowly and sip the port he hands you. It's strong, sweet, and it makes your ears feel like they're glowing. In the silence that follows, he picks up a leather-bound book titled Lactose and Lunacy, A Personal Journey. You don't ask questions. He reads aloud for a while, something about a man who dreamed of giraffes and bonnets, and you slowly feel yourself unraveling. The stress in your shoulders slides down your spine and pools somewhere warm. The dog climbs onto your lap like it's prearranged. You let it. Quirky tidbit. Some 19th century dream journals list specific cheeses and their effects. Gouda for flying dreams, Brie for romantic ones, and anything with truffle for mystic visions involving goats and unresolved guilt. Interpret that how you will. You excuse yourself gently, stepping out into the foggy London air. The street is quiet, lamps hissing, the city finally tired of its own noise. You turn a corner and find yourself in a bakery window, staring at a tray of cheese rolls labeled Dreamy Drifters, one per customer. Of course you take one. You take a bite of the warm, soft roll and realize the cheese inside isn't just any cheese. It's nutty, gently tangy, with a sweetness that sneaks in like an afterthought. You blink, and now you're inside the bakery itself, surrounded by the smell of baked bread, honey butter, and is that chamomile? The baker, a stout man with a face like a kindly turnip, slides another tray from the oven and nods toward the sign above the counter. Somniferous scones and slumber scrolls. He wipes his hands on his apron, then gestures to a small stool near the hearth. Sit. You've got the look of someone haunted by a late-night cheese goblin, he says, utterly straight-faced. You sit. He pours you a small mug of warm milk, with flecks of grated Gruyere melting into it. The drink smells better than it sounds, creamy and comforting, with a strange herby note you can't quite place. From my grandmother's book, he adds. She believed cheese wasn't just food. It was medicine, and occasionally a warning. You sip it. It's different. Good different. Mainstream historical fact. In 19th century herbalist circles, cheese was often paired with sedative herbs like chamomile, valerian root, and lemon balm. Bakers and home healers would combine these in breads or warm drinks intended to quiet the pulse and promote deep, dreamless sleep. He sets a scroll on the counter and unrolls it to reveal a handwritten recipe titled Midnight Melt-Away Loaf. The ink is smudged in places, as though the paper had survived one too many steamy kitchens. "You'd be amazed how many ailments were blamed on sleeplessness," he says, slicing off another warm cheese roll and sliding it to you. "Nightmares, digestive issues, even broken romances. No one slept. Everyone blamed the moon." You nod because that sounds suspiciously like your group chat. Quirky tidbit. There were actual cheese-based sleep regimens in some 19th century households, rotating soft cheeses with evening herbal infusions, like one might schedule skincare products. A sliver of cheese for serenity was a real saying, embroidered into pillowcases, if you can believe it. The baker leans in, elbows on the counter. Historians still argue whether the soothing effect came from the cheese itself, or the ritual surrounding it. Warm lighting, quiet conversation, the slow act of preparing something just for rest. You don't care either way. You're already on your third roll. The fire crackles softly, and he begins folding paper packets of cheese herb blends for the next morning's customers. You help, mostly by getting in the way. He doesn't seem to mind. The shop glows with a golden hush, and the idea of stress feels abstract now, like something other people experience on lesser timelines. Eventually, the baker hands you a small parcel tied with twine. "For the road," he says, "in case the dreams get nosy." You step outside and the city feels slower, more generous, as if even the chimneys are sighing in sync. You walk for a while, and the buildings begin to change. Narrow stone houses with flower boxes give way to long country roads and quiet hedgerows. A breeze carries the faint scent of sheep and wood smoke. The sky is soft with stars. And just like that, you find yourself at the edge of a village where the windows flicker with candlelight and a sign hangs loosely from an iron post. Dr. Eustace Featherby, sleep consultant and cheese artisan. Because of course that's a thing. You knock gently, and the door swings open with the exaggerated creak of a man who's definitely oiled the hinges for dramatic effect. Dr. Featherby, tall, thin, tweedy, possibly part crane, offers you a deep bow and waves you into a drawing room that smells like thyme, goat cheese, and overly earnest monologues. "I take it you're here for the tour de fromage somnolent?" he asks. You blink. "Sure?" He claps his hands, and a sleepy-looking assistant appears, wheeling in a cart with covered trays. Each is labeled Torpor-Tom, Bedtime Brie, Nap Gouda, Insomniac's Delight, and the Cheddar of Oblivion. "This," says the doctor, "is what separates amateurs from the truly unconscious. Mainstream historical fact. Some eccentric 19th century physicians blended homeopathy with diet therapy, experimenting with specific cheese profiles believed to impact the body's humoral balance and sleep rhythms. Certain textures and mold levels were thought to align with melancholic or sanguine temperaments. You pick up a cube of Nap Gouda and sniff it cautiously. It smells like optimism and a hint of regret. You'll want to avoid oblivion on an empty stomach." Featherby adds cheerfully, "Quirky tidbit. The phrase cheddar of oblivion was once scrawled in the margin of a sleep research journal by an overworked chemist in 1887. No one knows if it was a joke, a warning, or the name of a cheese cult. Either way, it stuck. You try a bit of brie, and your toes relax. Another slice, and your knees join the party. The assistant hands you a small cloth sachet filled with dried sage and cheese rinds, and places it gently over your eyes. Featherby dims the lanterns. Historians still argue whether cheese was truly medicinal or just a delicious placebo wrapped in folklore and melted hope," he says softly. "But Those people clearly never had my sleepy Stilton tart. You float in the chair now, light and fuzzy. Outside, the village drifts to sleep. Inside, your eyelids go heavy, your breath goes slow, and the last thing you hear is a soft click of tray being cleared and maybe a whisper, "Save room for breakfast." You wake, or dream you wake, in a cottage far from any map, where moss covers a roof and smoke curls lazily from a stone chimney. There's dew on the window ledge and the faint clink of crockery somewhere behind you. Someone is humming. You follow the sound to a low kitchen where a woman, in an apron dyed the color of blueberry jam, is carefully shaving hard cheese into a simmering pot. Her hair is braided with lavender stems, and she moves like she's done this every day for 100 years. "About time you showed up," she says without turning. "Your sleep aura has been all crooked lately." You blink. She ladles thick, steaming soup into a clay bowl and sets it on the table. "Eat," she commands gently, "before the dairy gods change their minds." You sit. The soup is savory, rich, flecked with nettles and little gold petals that somehow taste like comfort. It wraps around your bones and nudges the tired places you didn't know were sore. Mainstream historical fact. In rural parts of 19th century Europe and North America, cheesy night soups were common remedies for insomnia. Recipes varied, some with onion or parsnip, others with elderflower or bone broth, but the one shared ingredient was always a melting, sleepy cheese like Emmental or Wensleydale. The woman, who hasn't given you her name, sits across from you and starts shelling peas with surprising intensity. People used to think nightmares were caused by sleeping with your mouth open, she says casually. So naturally they blamed cheese, said it invited spirits through your teeth. You snort laugh. She doesn't. That's not even the weird part, she continues. One village kept cheese under their pillows to confuse the ghosts. Quirky tidbit. In parts of Victorian England, it was common to place small chunks of cheese wrapped in linen under one's pillow as a folk remedy for good dreams, or at least fewer hauntings. Some believed it encouraged prophetic visions, especially if the cheese had holes. You know, windows to the beyond. You reach for another spoonful and ask, "Did any of it work?" She shrugs. Historians still argue whether these were superstitions, coping mechanisms, or just an excuse to eat dairy in bed. But I say if it works, let it be magic. Outside, rain starts tapping the windows in a rhythm that sounds suspiciously like a lullaby. You stretch your toes under the table and feel a thick woven rug beneath your feet, scratchy in a way that makes you feel real. Present, the woman stands, brushes pea pods into a bowl, and opens a cupboard full of small glass jars labeled in crooked handwriting. Midnight rind, drowsy dust, whisper Gruyere, ghost repellent mozzarella. You point at the last one. She winks. A small mismatched cheese wheel wrapped in wax cloth appears in your lap. It's still warm. You don't question how. She hands you a spoon carved from walnut and tells you to dig into the center. The texture is like custard, but with a sharper finish, complex, strange, almost like licking a memory. You've just eaten one of the last dream cheeses, she says solemnly. They're illegal in 6 principalities and one unnamed duchy for obvious reasons. You wait for the punchline. None comes. She wraps your hands in a soft towel soaked in milk and sage. You'll start to remember things soon, but only the useful bits. The fire crackles. You catch your own reflection in the soup pot, and for a second you're 6 years old again, in footy pajamas, stealing slices of cheddar from a fridge you couldn't reach properly. Somehow, that moment glows in your chest like a candle. You sit with it, let it hum. The woman doesn't say anything more, just hands you a faded card that reads, "The dairy path is yours to walk, but only in soft socks." You don't fully understand it, but you definitely believe it. As you step back outside, the night air wraps around you like a sleepy scarf. Crickets tune their legs. Somewhere a cow yawns. Your feet carry you down a trail lit only by fireflies and the faint golden glow of something fermenting on a windowsill. You pass small cottages with slumbering cats, low barns filled with the sound of sheep dreaming, and one inexplicably luxurious cheese wheel resting on a velvet pillow inside a glass dome. You don't touch it, because some cheeses are better left unchallenged. Eventually, you reach a crooked signpost. Left town, right, Knapp Orchard, straight ahead, Lady Marmalade's Midnight Dairy Spa. You're not really choosing so much as being chosen. You drift toward the spa. Inside, it's all candlelight and honeyed air. A long row of stone tubs filled with warm waste stretches across a tile room painted with moons and mushrooms. A woman with skin like fresh cream and a voice like lullabies offers you a robe and gestures toward a tub. You lower yourself into the silky liquid, which smells like roses and roasted Parmesan. It's bizarre. It's perfect. Mainstream historical fact. In certain European bathhouses during the 1800s, wave baths were promoted as cures for sleeplessness, nervous disorders, and even heartbreak. Whey, the byproduct of cheese making, was considered cleansing to the spirit and silken to the skin. You lean back, neck resting on a folded cheesecloth pillow. Another guest is humming something that might be a lullaby or an ode to fondue. You hum along. Quirky tidbit. Some high society circles in the 1800s believed sleeping in a cheese-scented room encouraged luxurious dreams. The aroma trains the mind to soften, one pamphlet claimed. Entire sleeping chambers were scented with brie and lavender for elite insomniacs. You swished away gently, and the room seems to blur into watercolor. A faint voice says, "Historians still argue whether the benefits came from a ritual or the way itself, but they all agree it didn't hurt." Your eyes slip closed. The candlelight dances through your eyelids, and your breathing joins the rhythm of the rising steam. Outside, the night deepens. Inside, you melt. You drift out of the spa, glowing like a wheel of Gouda fresh from the cave. The stars overhead seem closer now, like they're leaning in to hear your thoughts. Your skin hums faintly with warmth. Your toes wrinkle from the way, and your breath, somehow, smells faintly of roasted almonds and alpine cheddar. You're halfway down a moonlit hill when you notice the cottage. It looks abandoned, but in that fairy tale way where you're pretty sure a grandmother lives inside who can both bake a pie and hex a moose. You knock. The door swings open, and the scent hits you like a lullaby to the face. Burnt sugar, thyme, and something deeply cheesy. Inside, everything's crooked. Floorboards tilt. Lampshades hang slightly askew. And at the center of it all, standing barefoot on a stack of books, is an old man in a robe made entirely of stitched-together cheesecloth. He adjusts his monocle, peers at you, and says, "You've got sleep stains on your aura. I can help." You believe him immediately. Mainstream historical fact. The 19th century was filled with self-declared sleep experts, herbalists, dietitians, mesmerists, and yes, even cheese mystics, who believed insomnia wasn't just a physical condition, but a spiritual misalignment. Dairy, they claimed, could realign one's inner tides, especially if consumed in a ritually restful environment. The man leads you to a chair and begins circling you slowly, muttering things like tired tibia energy and grumpy gallbladder shadow. He opened the cabinet and removes a jar labeled midnight rennet and a small wedge of cheese, so blue it's practically sulking. You don't ask questions. He sets the cheese on a carved stone plate and places it directly over a warm, flickering lantern. We'll do a melt reading, he explains. The way the cheese drips reveals your subconscious longings. Sometimes, if it's a Tuesday, you wait. The blue cheese starts to slump, like a dramatic actor in a second-rate opera. A single drip falls. He leans close, inspects it, then gasps softly. You crave rest, he whispers, and possibly someone to braid your hair while you listen to thunder. You're not saying he's wrong. Quirky tidbit. A fringe 19th century cult in northern Bavaria believed melted cheese held prophetic powers. Followers will hold sleep feasts, during which participants will consume fondue and dream communally, claiming their collective slumber revealed divine truths. They disbanded after someone allegedly dreamt of turnips overthrowing the monarchy. You're offered a spoon of the softened cheese, now glistening with oils and mystery. You eat it. It tastes like forgiveness and good weather. The old man wraps a warm towel around your shoulders and hands you a wooden amulet carved in the shape of a cheese wheel with tiny feet. For dream navigation, he says. You nod solemnly. You're not entirely sure if any of this is real, but your bones are lighter now, and that counts for something. He opens a back door and waves you out into a garden where the plants are silver with moonlight, and every leaf seems to exhale sleep. You walk to the garden, following a path of soft cheese wedges that have somehow become stepping stones. Eventually, the garden fades, and you arrive at a vast field where lanterns sway from shepherd's hooks and low benches circle a fire pit glowing with soft, amber flames. You take a seat next to a man playing a lute very badly. He nods. I was promised dreams, he mutters. You nod back. A woman in a dark green cloak approaches and begins passing out small paper-wrapped parcels, each marked with a name and a time. Yours simply says right now. You open it. Inside is a tiny, crumbly cheese square and a scrap of parchment that reads, "Eat this when your thoughts start to sprint." You do. Mainstream historical fact. Victorian apothecaries sometimes blended cheese with mild sedatives like lettuce syrup or poppy tinctures, delivering them in lozenge form to treat night fright or restless melancholia. These were often sold under poetic names like Whisper Cubes or The Gentle Bite. The cheese melts quickly in your mouth, earthy and slightly floral. You feel your heartbeat settle, your breathing deepen. Even the lute player seems to improve marginally. The firelight dances across everyone's faces. You notice how still they are, not stiff, just quietly folded into the night, as if they've handed over their worries in exchange for warmth. Quirky tidbit. Some 19th century societies hosted nighttime cheese circles, where guests would sit in silence and eat specific cheeses while focusing on calming thoughts. The belief was that communal eating created harmonic digestion, which somehow synced everyone's circadian rhythms like a sleepy Wi-Fi network. You lie back on a patch of soft moss. The stars pulse gently overhead, and someone begins humming a lullaby that involves at least 3 verses about Camembert defeating anxiety in single combat. You don't question it. You just let go as the fire crackles and your eyes begin to blur. You hear someone say, "Historians still argue whether these rituals were quaint nonsense or deeply intuitive healing. But then again, most of them have never needed help falling asleep in a century full of telegrams, top hats, and cheese anxiety." You smile, because really, who among us hasn't feared the blue-veined brie of emotional collapse? You close your eyes, not to sleep, but to float. The cheese is working. You wake, or at least you sort of wake, in a dim wood panel room that smells like toasted oats and wax boots. A single candle flickers nearby, casting shadows on the walls that look suspiciously like dancing wheels of cheddar in top hats. You're pretty sure you've wandered into someone's subconscious cheese dream. A door creaks. In walks a woman with a clipboard. She's wearing a paisley dress and an expression that says she hasn't slept since the Crimean War. Without greeting you, she begins the pace. "You're late for your cheese temperament assessment," she mutters. "We'll begin with a snacking history." She hands you a quill and parchment labeled Mood-Affine Dairy Preferences, 1873 edition. Questions include: do you experience recurring dreams of Gruyere on ladders? When agitated, do you prefer brie, brashness, or both? Has your spirit animal ever wept in a cheese cave? You circle yes to all three, because why not? Mainstream historical fact. In the 19th century, some physicians began classifying cheeses based on their effects on mood and personality. Gruyere was thought to ground nervous temperaments, while soft goat cheeses were recommended for melancholics. These pairings weren't just dietary. They were seen as therapeutic alliances between dairy and disposition. The woman squints at your answers, clicks her tongue, then opens a large velvet curtain to reveal a contraption that looks like a guillotine mated with a fondue set. "This," she says with a flair that suggests at least one failed career in theater, "is the Somnopress. It is, in theory, a cheese-infused headrest meant to align your cervical vertebrae with your emotional curds. It smells faintly of rosemary and defeat. You sit, or recline, or fold, whatever the device demands. And then the humming begins, not from the machine, but from a tiny gramophone nearby, playing what sounds like lullabies sung by sleepy monks who once sold Parmesan to pirates. You start to drift. Quirky tidbit. A small circle of British sleep reformers in 1869 developed what they called acoustic affinage, the belief that cheese cured in song carried vibrational properties that could induce drowsiness. They played lullabies to ripening wheels and marketed the results as Somnamilk Cheddar. It was banned after someone hallucinated an entire opera in their pantry. As you sink into the headrest, the woman dabs something on your wrists. Cheese oil? Eau de Roquefort, and begins to recite a poem about quiet Gouda dreams and cheddar sunsets. She leans in conspiratorial. You'd be surprised how many aristocrats in 1882 blamed their nightmares on improperly aged Stilton. One duchess claimed she dreamt being chased by dancing milkmaids for a week. She pauses, and yet she slept better than anyone else in the house. You nod solemnly. Sometimes terror brings clarity. A soft knock interrupts the ambience. A new figure enters, an older man with enormous eyebrows and a walking stick shaped like a cow's udder. He's wearing robes covered in tiny embroidered cheese knives and slippers shaped like soft rolls. He bows deeply. "I am the curator of curd memory," he intones. "And you, my dear guest, are overdue for the wheel room. You're pretty sure that's not a sentence any human has heard before. You follow him down a corridor filled with framed paintings of cheeses in historical battle scenes, Camembert at Trafalgar, and Mental at Thermopylae. A child has drawn googly eyes on one of them. Eventually, you arrive at a domed chamber with shelves stacked from floor to ceiling with carefully labeled rounds of cheese. A ladder creaks nearby as someone reaches for a particularly moldy specimen labeled Lord Butterworth's Nightmares, 1852. The curator taps a small glass box containing a perfectly wrapped cheese labeled you right now. This, he says gently, is your insomniac essence, the part of your spirit that won't go to bed. He hands you a spoon. You're not sure if you're supposed to eat your spirit or cuddle it, but the cheese smells like spiced apple cider and hope. So you take a bite. The warmth spreads immediately, down your throat, through your chest, to your fingertips and toes. The curator smiles. "She's coming," he whispers. You hear footsteps behind you. A woman enters barefoot, wearing a cloak made entirely of lace and linen napkins. She glows softly, like a wheel of triple cream under candlelight. Her voice is a sigh wrapped in velvet. "I'm the cheese mother," she says, "and I'm here to tuck your thoughts in." Mainstream historical fact. In the later 1800s, maternal archetypes were often invoked in sleep remedies. Mother cheese figures appeared in literature and advertising alike. Women who delivered warm dairy with stories, lullabies, and herbal poultices meant to quiet both body and mind. She guides you to a large chaise built from braided mozzarella and layered with woolen blankets. You lie back. She brushes your hair with fingers dipped in cream and tells you a story about a goat who loved too hard and a shepherd who invented ricotta to heal his broken heart. You're sobbing. Quietly, but sobbing. Historians still argue whether these deeply personal, emotional cheese rituals were placebo, pure quackery, or early mental health interventions disguised as dairy lore. "But honestly," she murmurs, "you look more peaceful than half the century." You believe her. You close your eyes again. The cheese mother hums softly. The curator files your spoon, and the woman with the clipboard fills out a chart that just says sleep. Incoming. Outside, the stars ripple like melted raclette. Inside, your chest rises, falls. The cheese is winning. You wake to the faint sound of clinking glasses and the distant aroma of, is that baked Gouda with apricots? Your eyes flutter open, and you're now sitting at a long banquet table. Candles flickering, chandeliers swaying as if someone just said something mildly scandalous, and platters of cheese stretching from one end of the table to the other like a dairy-driven pilgrimage. Welcome to the Insomniac's Midnight Cheese Symposium. A man in a pinstripe vest and monocle taps his glass with a butter knife. "Honored guests," he announces, "tonight we dine to dream." He gestures dramatically to the feast before you. Wedges, wheels, crumbles, curls, cubes, shavings, and fondue pots bubbling like sleepy volcanoes. You spot a card next to one block labeled Drowsy Dorset Blue, aged under moonlight, best paired with ennui. Mainstream historical fact. In certain 19th century British circles, cheese-tasting salons were all the rage, especially among intellectuals who believed cheese might hold the key to dream manipulation. It was said that the right pairing could produce vivid imagery or knock you out cold. You're handed a plate and encouraged to build your own slumber strategy. You opt for a modest slice of soft Asherah goat cheese, a smear of quince paste, and a small triangle of what the waiter simply calls nap time Gruyere. The texture is creamy, the flavor oddly nostalgic, like falling asleep in a field of sun-warmed laundry. A woman across the table, wrapped in a shawl that looks crocheted from fondue forks, leans over conspiratorially. They say if you eat too much Roquefort, your dreams get subtitles, she whispers. You both pause. French or German subtitles? You ask. She shrugs. Depends on the humidity. Quirky tidbit. In 1883, a Viennese sleep researcher claimed he had achieved full lucidity in his dreams by consuming 2 ounces of blue cheese with strong black tea right before bed. Unfortunately, he also claimed he dreamed himself into a duel with an eggplant and had to retire from academia. You sip warm chamomile from a porcelain cup shaped like a mouse. The table starts to blur at the edges, as if the feast itself is winding down, or maybe the feast is winding you down. Suddenly a gong sounds. Everyone at the table freezes. A man wearing an enormous wheel of Edam as a hat steps forward with solemn dignity. It is time, he intones, for the final tasting, the somnolent Stilton. A hush falls. The cheese is presented with theatrical flair, on a velvet pillow, lit from above by what may or may not be a glowworm in formal wear. The host leans in. This was aged in a cave lined with lullabies, he whispers, sealed with beeswax, fed poetry. You're handed a slice. You taste it, and the world exhales. Historians still argue whether the Stilton sleep trials of 1874 were genuine scientific attempts at improving sleep hygiene or just elaborate excuses to throw nocturnal cheese parties. Either way, the results were compelling. Over 80% of participants reported more vivid dreams, deeper rest, and a distinct inability to remember where they left their shoes. You slump a little in your seat, vision tilting like a rocking cradle. The chandeliers blur into halos. The conversations around you grow quieter, like bees drifting off mid-buzz. Someone begins to hum, a haunting tune that feels both ancient and absurdly specific, like something your great-great-aunt might have sung while making grilled cheese over an open flame. The woman beside you rests her head on a wheel of Havarti. The man with the monocle has abandoned his place at the table to snooze inside a hollowed Parmesan rind. You follow suit. A server gently nudges a velvet chaise beneath you. We call this the repose recliner, she says, pillowed with ricotta, lined in moon-salted sheep's wool. You don't even bother pretending to resist. As you sink in, someone places a napkin over your chest like a sleepy shroud. Someone else mumbles, "Dreams be melty." It might be a blessing or a strange request. Your eyes close. Your thoughts float. You dream. Of course you do. About a talking cheddar who leads a tiny village of snoring raccoons. They worship a statue made of Baby Bell. You are declared their mayor and gifted a crown that's suspiciously pungent. The crown fits. Mainstream historical fact. Some 19th century households kept dream journals beside the kitchen hearth, specifically to record visions believed to be influenced by cheese intake. Several of these were preserved, containing both profound revelations and entries like, "Fought Napoleon with a breadstick again." You wake, maybe 5 minutes or 5 decades later, in a softly glowing hallway lined with doors. Each one bears a cheese name. Each one pulses with the warmth of firelight and velvet sleep. A voice echoes behind you, familiar, gentle, slightly amused. you'll want door 14. That one pairs best with your personality type and digestive tract. You nod because why question cheese destiny? As you reach for the handle, you notice the doorknob is shaped like a sleepy brie. The plaque above reads, "Sweet dreams, slightly toasted." You smile, you open the door, and step into the next dream. You step through the brie-shaped doorknob into a warm, low-lit room that smells faintly of thyme, toasted almonds, and something unplaceably creamy, like a memory that's gone soft at the edges. There's a fire crackling in a modest hearth, casting long, drowsy shadows across a cozy parlor furnished in floral prints and thick woolen throws. A clock ticks somewhere, but slowly, like it's not in a rush. You're not either. This room is home to one of the 19th century's more peculiar cheese-based sleep strategies, the Midnight Cheese Diary Club. You pad toward a worn velvet armchair, beside a low table piled with ink pots, feather quills, and small, leather-bound journals. A porcelain plate rests atop the stack, with a slice of cheddar, so pale it almost looks ghostly. You sniff it, mild, slightly nutty, maybe a touch of insomnia is still clinging to the rind. Mainstream historical fact. In 1880s Edinburgh, a small group of insomniacs began documenting their dreams after eating specific cheeses before bed. They claimed that certain cheeses produce recurring themes, like flight, loss, love, or forgotten school exams, and that writing down these dreams improved their sleep over time. You take a seat, slice the cheese, and nibble carefully, expecting what? A wave of drowsiness? A spontaneous sonnet? Instead, your mind quiets, your body sighs, and your fingers find the journal, flipping to a blank page so old it practically begs for ink. A note inside the front cover reads, "Start with the dream you wish you'd had." So you do. You scribble something about flying over a field of mozzarella dandelions, chased by a wheel of camembert, wearing a monocle. You give him a name, Sir Munster, and laugh quietly to yourself. The fire cracks louder, as if approving. Quirky tidbit. A lesser-known Victorian belief held that writing down a cheese-formed dream and then sleeping with the page under your pillow could actually invite that dream back again. Some took it so seriously they developed little leather pouches just to carry their dreams to bed, calling them cheese charms. You flip through other entries in the journal, written in loops and slants, and the occasional ink blot shaped suspiciously like a wedge of Swiss. One entry reads, "Had blue cheese before bed, dreamt an ocean made of soup. The crabs were librarians. I forgot my swimsuit, but no one noticed." Another, "Brie equals good, Stilton equals chaos. Cheddar equals deeply emotional reunion with my third-grade teacher, who was a duck." You close the book with a soft thud and chuckle to yourself. It's oddly comforting. Knowing others once stare at their ceilings at 2:14 a.m. wondering if cheese could soften the blow of insomnia. Historians still argue whether these diaries were taken seriously as therapeutic tools or were simply late-night distractions for people with too much dairy and too little REM sleep. But in hindsight, who's to say they weren't both? A bell rings gently in the corner of the room, drawing your gaze toward a small side door now glowing faintly gold. You rise. Slower now, your limbs like pudding in winter, and approach the door. On the other side, a new space. Part greenhouse, part tea room, part cheese laboratory. Long rows of potted herbs stretch across the room, many with little handwritten labels. Lavender for calm, lemon balm for clarity, rosemary for dreams about boats. And at the center, a woman in a floral apron gently stirring something in a copper pot over a small blue flame. Cheese tisane, she explains without looking up. Steeped herbs in milk with a whisper of brie. Settles the mind, unclutters the dream shelf. You blink. Wait, cheese tea. She glances up, smiling. Better than it sounds. Worse than it smells. Try it. You do. It's warm, floral, slightly funky in a way that somehow works. Like drinking comfort wrapped in a second-hand quilt. Quirky detail. A short-lived trend in late 19th century France involved cheese infusions, warm milk steeped with herbs and tiny cheese crumbles, offered as sleep tonics in some rural inns. Guests often swore they produced dreams shaped like music. You sip again and again. The walls around you feel more porous now, like they're willing to let you drift through them into something slower, softer. The woman hums while tending her kettle. You find yourself curling onto a cushioned bench, the scent of lemon thyme in your nostrils, the whisper of old ink in your thoughts. You think, briefly, about all the people over the centuries who stare at their ceilings, desperate for sleep, and turn instead to cheese. You think about their diaries, their dreams, their duck teachers. You think about the warmth you feel now, the gentle weight behind your eyes, the comfort of stories shared through centuries, even weird ones, even stinky ones. And you drift, you stir, barely, just enough to register that the world around you smells nutty. Not in the metaphorical sense, though, let's be honest. Everything about 19th century cheese-based insomnia cures qualifies. But in the literal way, toasted walnuts, baked pears, and maybe something suspiciously resembling Gruyere. You're in a bedroom now. Well, sort of. More like a display room in a particularly deranged historical cheese museum. There's a faint glow from a lantern, casting light over a modest four-poster bed dressed in patchwork quilts and a pillow so overstuffed it looks like it might file a worker's grievance. A tray rests on the bedside table. On it, a slice of warm, spiced cheesecake. No, not cheesecake. Cheesecake. You peer closer. It's got the golden hue of baked hard cheese, tiny flecks of cinnamon and nutmeg, and somehow a sprig of mint doing its absolute best to look proud despite the odd company. You reach for a fork, because obviously you do. Mainstream historical fact. In some parts of 19th century England and the northeastern U.S., spiced cheesecakes, dense, savory sweet loaves made from sharp cheddar or Cheshire cheese, were believed to be gut-soothing nightcaps. They were often served with warm cider and a prayer against nightmares. You take a bite. It's complicated. Warm. Yes. Comforting. Sort of. A little like someone baked your childhood memories inside a tavern and then dusted the result with cinnamon. The bed creaks slightly as you ease back against the pillows. In the corner, you spot a rocking chair. Empty, but still rocking. Because of course it is. You're in a dream stitched together by cheese, tradition, and questionable sleep science. Quirky tidbit. Some traveling cheesemongers of the 1800s doubled as midnight snack vendors, offering late-night bites to restless urban workers and promising that aged cheddar calmed the steam of modern thoughts. One even coined the slogan, "Aged dairy for an aged day." You lean your head back, breathing in the scent of warm dairy and distant herbs. There's a gentle pressure in your eyelids now, like sleep finally sliding into room wearing slippers. But before you drift, something odd happens. You hear a voice. Not spooky, not ominous, just practical. Too much cheese will bind your dreams, it says, but just enough will stitch them into lullabies. You glance around, but there's no one, just you, your cake, and the echo of something your great-great-grandma might have muttered while knitting in front of a peat fire. Historians still argue whether these sleep rituals were placebo, legitimate folk wisdom, or elaborate excuses to eat cheese in bed without judgment. But the stories remain, passed through generations like heirloom recipes no one fully trusts, but everyone keeps trying anyway. You swing your legs over the side of the bed. Now you're walking down a narrow hallway, with floors creaking underfoot, oil paintings leaning at odd angles. Every door you pass seems to lead to a different cheese-based insomnia cure. You peek through one. A man in a velvet robe is singing lullabies to a wheel of Parmesan. Close that one. Another door. A woman is soaking her feet in warm whey while sipping what looks like a buttered Stilton smoothie. Okay, that door stays closed forever. You press on. Finally, the hallway opens into what can only be described as a 19th century apothecary, if it had been sponsored by a dairy cooperative. Shelves stretched to the ceiling, crammed with jars labeled in delicate cursive. Marble cream for sleepless legs, Wensleydale whiff. Tincture Havarti, 2 drops only, and something just called the night gorgonzola. You gingerly sidestep that last one. At the back of the room, a small marble counter with a brass bell and a tiny handwritten sign asks about our dream-preserving linens. Naturally, you ring the bell. A thin man with wild gray sideburns and eyes like damp marbles appears from beneath the counter. He doesn't seem surprised to see you. He slides forward a velvet pouch. Inside, a folded cloth embroidered with a wheel of cheese and the stitched words, "Sweet dreams and dairy things." You blink. He says nothing. You take it anyway. He nods like you've passed some kind of test you didn't know you were taking. You turn, pouch in hand, back toward the door that now leads, because of course it does, to a stone staircase bathed in soft yellow candlelight. You descend. Each step releases a different aroma. Lavender, beeswax, oat biscuit, and finally, aged cheddar. The air is warmer down here, thick with calm. You step into what feels like a cheese chapel. No pews, just big overstuffed cushions. Warm light, and a domed ceiling painted with soft clouds shaped suspiciously like wedges and wheels, and the occasional Gouda angel. You kneel, not out of reverence, but because your body suddenly feels heavier, anchored in the safest way. One last piece of trivia rolls across your mind like a bedtime marble. Quirky fringe belief. Some rural families in early 19th century Wales stitched cheesecloths into their pillows, not for practicality, but for protection. They believed sleep demons disliked the smell of dairy, and that blessed cheesecloth warded off both nightmares and tax collectors. You smile, not because you believe it, but because someone once did, and now, wrapped in memory, dream-stitched linens, and cheese that somehow became medicine. So do you? You wake, or at least you think you do, to the smell of something tangy sizzling on a cast iron skillet. The floor beneath your feet is cool flagstone, and the walls are timbered in that very, we swear it's authentic, countryside style. Even though you have the vague suspicion you're in a dream sponsored by dairy. In the center of the room is a wooden stove, gently popping and sighing. A wedge of cheese is melting over a rustic slice of bread, and a kettle rattles softly beside it. There's an old woman humming near the fire, one hand stirring a cup, the other wrapped around a cheesecloth pouch. She presses gently to her temple. You get the feeling this is someone's grandmother, maybe even yours, pulled from the foggy nostalgia drawer of your brain, and she doesn't seem surprised to see you. Without looking up, she mutters, "Insomnia's a leaky boat." You patch it with what you've got. Then she nods toward the table, where a curious little setup waits. A candle, a ball of soft cheese, and a spoon. Mainstream historical fact. In rural parts of the American Midwest and Appalachian regions during the 1800s, it was common for people suffering from night agitation to melt soft cheeses, like farmer's cheese or Neuchâtel, into warm milk by candlelight, stirring slowly as a calming ritual before bed. This act was meant to soothe nerves, both through warmth and repetition. So, naturally you sit because you've come this far. You strike the match and light the candle. The cheese begins to loosen in its bowl, slowly succumbing to the heat. You stir it gently, watching tiny bubbles form and release like sleepy sighs. The motion, the glow, the aroma, it's hypnotic. You could fall asleep right now. But the old woman speaks again. Now you've got to whisper your worry into the cheese. Otherwise, it don't carry it away. Right? Of course. You lean forward, pretend to whisper something deep and meaningful. But in reality, you say, "I forgot my Netflix password." She nods solemnly like you just offered a soul fragment. Then, with great care, she wraps the cheese in a bit of linen and tosses it into the hearth. It sizzles once, sharp and final. "There," she says. Now it's the cheese's problem. You stifle a laugh, but part of you really wants to believe it's true. Quirky tidbit. There's an obscure 19th century folk belief in parts of Eastern Europe that cheese could absorb dreams and even misfortunes. Some villagers kept a dream cheese by their bedside, replacing it weekly and burying the old wedge under a tree, claiming it kept away both spirits and indigestion. Back at the table, the candle has nearly burned out. The room dims, but your eyelids don't protest. Everything feels heavier in that good way, like gravity is trying to pull you gently back to bed. You hear soft footsteps, your own, apparently, and now you're walking through a garden under a velvet sky. There are trellises woven with night-blooming jasmine, and every so often, a plate of cheese has been left beneath a flower pot, like little offerings. The air smells of soil, dew, and aged brie, because of course it does. You follow the path until it leads to a gazebo strung with faintly glowing lanterns. Inside, a table set for tea. A young woman in a high-collared nightgown is pouring hot water over what looks like cheese rind stuffed sachets. She doesn't notice you or pretends not to and stirs with delicate fingers. Then she hums, and with that hum, the air seems to settle, to pulse a little slower. She sips. You sit across from her. She offers you a porcelain cup. Steam curls upward, carrying the scent of lavender, honey, and, well, cheese. Historians still argue whether these nighttime cheese infusions had any real sedative properties, or whether the effect was mostly psychological, an edible placebo wrapped in ritual and warm comfort. But even skeptics admit the act itself, the brewing, the sipping, the slowness, probably helped more than they expected. You take a sip. It's not bad. In fact, it's good, soothing. It reminds you of quiet kitchens and nights when nothing hurt and no one needed you be awake. The woman smiles, not at you, but at the steam curling in her cup. It's about softness, she says, in taste. In time. You nod, even if you don't quite know what she means. Somewhere, a bell chimes softly. Not an alarm. More like a signal that you cross a threshold into something gentler. You stand. The garden path has changed. It leads back toward a cottage door, lit from within. Inside, a warm room, quilted walls, candlelit shadows dancing across shelves filled with jars of cheese rub and lactose tinctures and curd commerce. You don't read the labels too closely. You just find the bed, and it's perfect. Feather mattress, linen sheets, a blanket with little embroidered cheeses stitched in neat rows like sleepy soldiers. You slip beneath the covers, body warm and heavy. There's one last square of cheese on a dish by your pillow. You smile. You don't eat it. You just rest beside it. And for some reason, that's more than enough. You're not sure if you ever actually left the bed, or if the dream just picked up again and decided to run with a cheese-themed sequel. Either way, you now find yourself inside what appears to be a Victorian apothecary shop, although the lighting is suspiciously cozy for a place full of jars labeled bone powder and mercurial salts. A bell jingles as the door closes behind you. Wooden floorboards creak underfoot. The shelves are cluttered with glass vials, parchment scrolls, and round wheels of aging cheese wrapped in muslin and wax. At the counter stands a man with a beard so regal it could sign treaties. His vest is checkered. His spectacles are perched halfway down his nose, purely for aesthetic effect. "Welcome," he intones, "to Dr. Weathersby's Nocturnal Remedies and Infirmagary." You blink. Twice. "Cheese?" he asks, holding up a round tin with great theatricality. "Or sleep?" You shrug. "Yes." Mainstream historical fact. In the mid to late 19th century, as insomnia became increasingly medicalized, especially in urban Europe and North America, cheese was both praised and blamed. Doctors debated its effects vigorously in journals, with some advocating soft cheeses like Camembert as a nightcap aid, while others decried late cheese as a trigger for disturbing dreams and nervous agitation. It became something of a Rorschach test for sleep health. Dr. Weathersby offers you a sample tray with alarming formality. "This wedge," he says, pointing to a creamy triangle flecked with green herbs, "was aged in linen and moonlight, designed to chase away ruminative thoughts." You nibble. It's oddly floral. "This one," he continues, "is salted with crushed valerian root, extremely rare, made only by monks in storm-swept abbeys that no longer exist on any map. Tastes like damp stone and nostalgia." And finally, he says, "a blend of Cheshire and roasted fig, soaked overnight in warm cider and memory." You take a bite. It melts on your tongue like a bedtime story you only half remember. He nods gravely. You've chosen wisely. With a flourish, he sweeps aside a velvet curtain behind the counter. A narrow staircase descends into what looks like a candlelit underground lounge. You follow, because honestly, at this point, refusing the call would be rude. Below, the walls are lined with books and tapestries depicting drowsy cows and moonlit meadows. A harp plays somewhere in the corner. There are chairs with blankets draped over the arms, and warm platters of toasted cheese pastries circulate on floating wooden trays. People sit, recline, nap. One man has fallen asleep halfway through a wheel of Gouda. No one judges him. Quirky tidbit. There's a lesser-known Victorian sleep cheese club that briefly existed among certain literati in London. They met weekly to test unusual cheeses for dream influence, recording their visions and effects in wax-sealed journals. Some entries report full lucid dreams involving flying armchairs and heated arguments with Greek philosophers over dessert platters. Dr. Weathersby gestures for you to sit in a carved walnut rocker. A servant you didn't notice before arrives with a porcelain teacup. Chamomile and Stilton infusion, he explains, served slightly warm, paired with a whisper of nutmeg. You sit, you blink slowly, you exhale. Around you, the lounge flickers gently. No sharp sounds, no abrupt movement. Only the distant hum of harp strings and the smell of cheese in every gentle permutation. Buttery, grassy, smoky, sweet. This is the kind of place where no one ever asks what time it is, or how long you've been here. Historians still argue whether these underground cheese saloons, sometimes jokingly called slumber parlors, ever really existed beyond a few eccentric hosts and obscure diary entries. But the idea that people would gather, taste cheese, and intentionally dream together has appeared more than once in 19th century social ephemera. You lean back. Your body lets go of something heavy, like a forgotten-to-do list or a birthday you missed 3 years ago. Then the rocker moves, not like a normal rocking chair, more like a slow gliding motion, like being cradled by a very polite ghost. You're moving down the room now, past velvet curtains and lanterns dimming in turn. Each little alcove reveals a different dreamscape. A snow-covered barn where a farmer snoozes with cheese will tuck beside him. A windmill kitchen where a grandmother stirs warm cheese into porridge while murmuring lullabies in Dutch. And a grassy hill where children toss cheese rounds like frisbees under moonlight. You drift through these scenes without stopping. They're soft, gentle, cheese-soaked and whimsical in all the best ways. Eventually, your chair settles near a stained glass window shaped like a wedge of cheddar. Outside, the moon rises like it's also been aged 12 years and stored in wax. The chair sighs beneath you. Or maybe that's you. Someone places a warm cloth over your forehead. You don't see who it is. A voice, not Dr. Weathersby's, but someone just as composed, whispers, "Dream carefully." You nod, eyes too heavy to lift. The harp fades out, and the only sound left is the gentle bubbling of a fondue pot left to simmer for someone who hasn't arrived yet. It's waiting, just like the dream, just like you. You wake, or maybe just shift inside a deeper layered dream, somewhere far less velvet and walnut scented. The harp is gone, the underground lounge has vanished, and you now find yourself in a chilly farmhouse kitchen, its wooden beams creaking softly under the weight of winter. Snow taps against the windows like a sleepy code. Outside, a lone cow snorts into morning air, steam rising off her back like she's brewing thoughts instead of milk. You're bundled in an oversized nightshirt and wrapped in a patchwork quilt that smells like cedar, soup, and old gossip. In your lap sits a stoneware mug, warm to the touch, filled with, you guessed it, something suspiciously cheesy. The woman bustling about the hearth doesn't introduce herself. She doesn't need to. She's wearing the apron of someone who's already judged your sleep habits and found them lacking. "I warmed up the cheese broth," she says, pointing a wooden ladle at your face. "Don't let it congeal this time." Mainstream historical fact. In rural 19th century households, particularly in colder European regions like Switzerland and parts of Germany, warm cheese broths or gruels were served as nightcaps. The idea was that the fat and salt content helped lull the body into a heavier rest. Think of it as edible gravity. It wasn't uncommon for cheese to be simmered with milk, barley, or even onion to soothe nerves and fill stomachs before bed. You sip. It's salty and odd, with a creamy texture that's equal parts comforting and questionable, like a hug from someone who doesn't believe in personal space. The woman continues stirring the pot, muttering about neighbors who snore like thunder and whether that ruins her aging cave humidity. You're not sure whether to nod in sympathy or ask for seconds. A cat sits nearby, staring at you like it knows you're not from around here. It blinks once, judgmentally, then curls into a tighter pretzel beside the hearth. You shift under your quilt and gaze around the room. Every surface bears the patina of time and butter. The shelves are stacked with earthen jars, many labeled with things like curd salve, sleep salt, and goat number 2 special. You decide not to ask about that last one. She finally stops stirring and ladles a second portion into your mug without asking. Her eyes soften just for a moment. You've got the look of someone who dreams too loudly. She says, almost kindly, "This'll hush him." Quirky tidbit. Among some small mountain communities, cheese was believed to act as a filter for dreams. Soft cheeses filtered in pleasant visions, while hard cheeses kept out the dark ones. Folk recipes often paired soft cheese with calming herbs like chamomile or woodruff, under belief that it would pacify the soul before sleep. The snow thickens outside and the farmhouse dims. The only light now is a fire, the flicker of a candle stub, and the soft halo of steam rising from your mug. The woman takes a seat across from you, adjusting her shawl and fixing you with the look of someone about to say something both practical and slightly threatening. "Here's the thing about rest," she says. "It's not always sleep. Sometimes it's just stopping long enough to remember you exist." You nod. Your mug is empty again. The warmth in your belly spreads out toward your fingers and toes. Your thoughts begin to slur. Not in a bad way. More like they've taken off their shoes and settled into a rocking chair. Historians still argue whether cheese's sleep-inducing effects were truly physiological, caused by tryptophan and fat content, or simply psychological. Was it the cheese itself, or the ritual surrounding it that helped people fall asleep? Even modern researchers haven't agreed on whether late-night dairy is a curse or a cure. But sitting here now, you're not concerned with science. You're more focused on the soften of the fire, the gentle clink of a ladle against a pot, and the way your limbs feel like warm bread dough left to rise. Somewhere upstairs, a floorboard creaks. The woman doesn't flinch. "That's the house," she says. "It dreams, too." You allow yourself to drift, eyes half-lidded. A gentle daze creeps in, slow as molasses but warmer than most people. The cat gets up, stretches in dramatic silence, and hops into your lap. You take this as a celestial endorsement. Outside, the snow begins to glow faintly blue, the kind of light that exists only when the world is so quiet. It starts inventing its own colors. The woman stands, adjusts the kettle one last time, and pulls down a bundle of dried herbs from the beam overhead. "Fennel, thyme, and old songs," she says, tossing it into the pot. "Helps with dreaming clean." You smile, slow, syrupy, grateful. She pats your shoulder. It's not soft. It's firm and real and anchoring. "Finish your broth," she says. And when the chair starts rocking, don't fight it. That's just the next part. You blink once, and the quilt wraps tighter. The cat purrs. The fire exhales, and the chair begins to move. Not dramatically, Not suddenly, just a slow, subtle shift. Forward, then back, like someone breathing beneath you. You let go of the mug. It doesn't fall. It simply disappears. And you close your eyes. Because if this isn't sleep, it's doing an extremely convincing impersonation. You rock gently in that chair, the quilt rising with your chest, the cat's purr melting into the rhythm of your breath. You drift through layers of sensation, warmth, wood smoke, and that curious aftertaste of cheese seasoned with medieval conviction. But then the chair stops. You're somewhere else now. A marketplace, maybe. The cobblestones beneath your feet are cold, and the air smells like sheep, thyme, and the deeply suspicious optimism of 19th-century sleep peddlers. A stout man in a velvet coat is waving a wheel of cheese in one hand and a scroll in the other. His mustache curls up like it has secrets. "Step right up," he calls. Guaranteed slumber with every slice. You're not sure if this is real or just your digestive system staging a theatrical performance. Around him, people gather, some bleary-eyed, others downright feral with fatigue. A woman in a bonnet holds a squalling baby. A man in a tailcoat clutches an empty tea tin. They all stare at the cheese like it's the last lifeboat on a very sleepy Titanic. Mainstream historical fact. By the mid-1800s, traveling salesmen known as cheese chemists or sleepmongers roamed parts of rural Europe and North America, offering supposedly sleep-inducing cheese concoctions. Many were mixtures of aged cheddar or blue cheese with opium extracts, valerian root, or wine-soaked rinds. Sold under names like Nightmare No More and Dream Curd Deluxe. You watch the velvet man slice his cheese theatrically. A cube is handed a bonnet lady, who chews thoughtfully, then slumps against a crate with a sigh so profound it moves pigeons. You try a piece. It's sharp, like biting into a thunderstorm, but oddly comforting. Your fingers tingle. The cobblestones shimmer. Suddenly you're in a different booth. There's one line with jars and labeled, "Cheese Aroma for Insomnia." An eager boy spritzes you in the face with what smells like goat breath and crushed daisies. Activates your pineal gland, he says proudly. Quirky tidbit. In 19th century apothecaries, there were attempts to distill cheese essence as a type of inhalable or rub-on sleep aid. One product, known as curd vapor number 3, claimed to induce peaceful sleep in under 5 minutes when massaged into the temples. It mostly induced sneezing fits. You duck into the next stall where a scholarly-looking man in round spectacles offers a lecture titled Dreams, Dairy, and Drowsiness, a treatise. You nod politely, pretend to understand phrases like neuronal cheese fatigue threshold. He hands you a booklet with the memorable subtitle, Why Nightmares Are Just Overcooked Dairy. Historians still argue whether cheese's impact on dreams was scientifically plausible or purely the result of social folklore and gut-based paranoia. Some say it was tryptophan. Others claim placebo or psychosomatic hysteria. Because nothing ruins sleep faster than worrying about your cheese ruining sleep. You wander deeper into the marketplace. The stalls become stranger. One is selling tiny cheese figurines carved into sleeping cats. Another features pillows stuffed with cheesecloth soaked in camembert brine. You raise an eyebrow. The vendor shrugs. For the daring. Then there's a booth labeled Midnight Gouda Seances. You pass quickly. A bell tolls somewhere. The crowd begins to yawn in unison. More performance than necessity. You realize this marketplace might not be a real place so much as a collective, melty hallucination of every insomniac who's ever eaten dairy too close to bedtime. Still, you don't leave. Not yet. Because here, within this loony bazaar of blue-veined remedies and brie-scented prayers, you find something oddly calming. No one pretending sleep is simple. Everyone is trying. Together, and sometimes that's enough. The cheese man with a velvet coat gives you a wink and a coupon that reads, "One dream, redeemable anytime. No expiry." You tuck it into your sleeve. The cobbles shift beneath you. The marketplace dissolves. Now you're in a parlor, rich with the flicker of lamplight and the scent of cherry wood. You're seated on a fainting couch, legs tucked up, and across from you sit a Victorian woman in lace gloves and a very serious expression. She's holding a small wheel of cheese on a silver tray like it's an ancient relic. "This," she says gravely, "is the Stilton asleep." You lean forward. She slices a sliver and places it on your tongue like communion. Instant warmth floods your chest. The couch grows softer. The walls bend just slightly, like fabric under breath. "Sleep," she says, "requires surrender. Cheese merely assists." You nod. Your eyelids weigh heavy. The woman smiles, vanishing into velvet and vapor. The room begins to breathe. Slowly with you, in, out. The silver tray remains, empty now, reflecting your half-lit gaze. You don't speak. You just exist, wrapped in the soft echo of centuries trying to coax rest from rhymes and rituals, warmth and whimsy. One last thing. On the mantel above the fireplace sits a dusty portrait of a cow wearing spectacles. Beneath it, in gold script, the words, "Behold the utter truth." You chuckle, then sleep, finally, does what it's been trying to do for 14 sections. It finds you. You wake, not entirely, but enough to notice your arms are warm, your toes curled, and something nearby smells faintly of Gouda and pine wood. A soft breeze brushes your temple. Curiously indoor, curiously comforting. There's a flicker of firelight somewhere in the distance, and then, as if you drifted to the fabric of dreams and stitched yourself to history, you find yourself back in a proper 19th century drawing room. The air is thick with velvet and conversation. You're seated on a well-stuffed chair, its back too straight to nap in, but its cushions too perfect to ignore. All around you, other guests sip chamomile cordial or swirl glasses of milk and wine toddies. Everyone is whispering about the same thing: how cheese, good cheese of course, can unlock the gates of slumber like a dairy-shaped key. The hostess, a severe woman with a jaw like a shovel and a laugh like a butter churn, taps her glass with a spoon. Tonight, she announces, we explore the final frontier, cheese dream divination. A few people clap. One man just nods solemnly and takes a bite of his cheese biscuit. Mainstream historical fact. In Victorian England, it was a semi-popular parlor pastime to eat specific types of cheese before bed and record the resulting dreams. People believed that each cheese variety had a different symbolic power. Blue cheese for prophecy, cheddar for romance, and brie for clarity. Some wealthy households even hosted cheese dream salons, complete with guest notebooks and themed servings. You glance at your plate. There's a wedge of something white and crumbling, perched like a secret on your napkin. You nibble. A small bell rings. The hostess points to a man in a cravat who's now sketching furiously in a notebook. Romantic tension with a stable boy, he mutters, eyes wild. I knew it. You look down at your plate. Yep, definitely brie. Suddenly, a quiet but persistent discussion breaks out by the fireplace. A man with wild eyebrows is arguing that cheese is merely a scapegoat, that sleep problems stem from the Industrial Revolution, not dairy. It's the coal smoke, he cries. It clouds the subconscious. Another guest counters that cheese merely reflects the soul's unrest. Historians still argue whether the link between cheese and vivid dreams is biological, cultural, or just the brain being overly theatrical after a heavy snack. Some blame the tyramine content in aged dairy, while others think it's all bedtime bias. If you expect strange dreams, you're more likely to remember them. The hostess hushes them with a gloved hand. It's not about answers, she says. It's about surrender. She dims the gas lamp a notch, and the whole room seems to sway gently, like a ship cradled by memory. You rise quietly and excuse yourself. No one stops you, because somehow they all know you've completed the tour. You walked the cracked cobblestones of cheesy promises and tiptoed across the lace-trimmed tightrope of Victorian sleep culture. You've sampled ancient Stiltons, chased folk remedies through candlelit kitchens, and questioned your own dairy-fueled perception of reality. You slip down the corridor. At the end is a small room with no windows and only one bed. The sheets smell faintly of lavender and dairy dreams. You crawl under. The mattress groans gently, not with age, but with understanding. You lie back. A cheesecloth curtain flutters. The last thing you see is a tiny candle burning on the nightstand. Its wax pool holds the shape of a cow, or maybe a key. Either way, it's enough. And now you breathe, longer, slower, deeper. The dream world has softened the edges, like an overripened camembert left out on a summer windowsill. Edges curled, center warm, ready to melt into whatever shape you need. You feel your body settle, the muscles no longer tight with questions or too curious midnight cravings. Your jaw unclenches, your fingers uncurl, your shoulders release the weight of centuries of sleepless souls who hoped a wedge of cheese might carry them gently into the next morning. Outside your mind, the world fades to quiet. No barking dogs, no ticking clocks, just a low hush, like cream poured over warm bread, or wind moving through a meadow too tired to whisper. If your thoughts return, let them. They're soft now, like crumbs on a plate after a late-night snack, harmless and fleeting. You've walked through crowded drawing rooms and quiet cobblers' kitchens. You've sat with dream alchemists, sleep chemists, and mischief mongers selling goat-scented miracles. You've heard the arguments, tasted the myth, and napped in 100 places at once. And now, there's nothing left to do. No more advice to consider. No more cheese to sample. Only breath. Only stillness. Only warmth. Let your mind go dim, like the last glow of a hearth fire behind old brick. And if there's any sound left at all, maybe it's a whisper somewhere inside your sleepy chest that says, yes, you made it. So rest now. You are safe. You are still. And you, dear friend, are deeply, gloriously asleep.